Hey everybody, welcome to the Black Flag Coalition. This week we're going to be talking a little bit about kind of the social conditioning and rebranding of the word anarchism and how it's kind of been misconstrued by the media, by governments, by invalid logic, things like that, and general misconceptions of the concept. Um, and then we also wanted to get into kind of the practical applications of what can you do with ideologies like anarchism in a statist society. Um, because sometimes certain things can seem very difficult to get around with laws and regulation and things of that nature. So we wanted to touch on basically agorism, um, black and gray market economics, and subverting the state both financially and through words and actions, and talking to people about these ideas and really getting into the weeds with them on it. So I guess we'll go ahead and start it off. First topic, Jesse, was kind of the misrepresentation of anarchism through the media, through propaganda and things like that, and then just kind of the general slander that's gone along with that sense.
Right. Mostly, there's a cultural conditioning. Words tend to have their definitions changed. You see it a lot in legalese, um, and you see it in the media all the time. People just start to tend to associate words with certain activities, behaviors, or conditions, and then they start making them into synonyms, and eventually they become exact. They redefine them.
Right. And in this case, it being anarchism or anarchy, meaning
Right.
chaos and disorder and violence and things of that nature, which isn't the case. We did cover the etymology in episode 1, I believe it was, where it really was just without a ruler.
Right.
That's simple.
Just it's without a ruler. No one owns you. No one is your master. It's your life, your body, your home, whatever. Um, and I mean, we can touch on that a little bit. Again, anarchy comes from Greek, "an" meaning without, "archos" meaning chief or ruler, and then that becomes anarchy, and that's all it is. That's all it means. It doesn't mean people running around killing each other or acting like rabid beasts.
And the first logical, the first illogical leap is really at when people think without a ruler automatically means without rules. That
Right.
that all of a sudden it's this state of chaos basically, and that is inaccurate. And so there's a lot of things that are just based off of that one first misconception of the idea. And then another big part of it too, it seems like whenever people try and naysay the idea, it's, well, look at every time the state's failed, it's collapsed or whatever, and then there has been anarchy. It's like, okay, you're talking about a situation where the state that everyone's relying on, the system that's in place that everyone relies on so heavily, once that kicks the bucket, once it screws up so bad that it leaves the entire population high and dry, it's really it's an already shitty situation. It's chaos that was introduced by the state in the first place. So then to say, oh well, look, it didn't work. It's like, okay, yeah, that doesn't really jive. A good example would be, moving. Where if you're moving from place to place and you're given some sort of notice ahead of time, 2 months or whatever, say, hey, you got to pack your stuff up and find someplace else. You then have time to find a new spot, save up money, get all your shit packed, get movers, all the stuff that goes along with moving, and you can do so in a very efficient manner, and it's not a big problem. But if you're kicked out overnight and all your shit's out on the curb and you've got no spare, money saved up for, first and last month's rent and all of that stuff, you're going to be in a really bad position to begin with. And so trying to get back on your feet you're already you've got a handicap. You're at a disadvantage to begin with, and that's the same thing with going from a society to a stateless society. It's the same concept.
Right. Um, and it pretty much comes down to when you're looking at it, you see people that are preppers, SHTF, shit hits the fan preparation, people that are putting together a year long stock of food and have a small arsenal and all the rounds they could possibly need in the event that they're attacked or they need to kill for food or whatever the case is. And they have this and that, and they're prepared. Now imagine that the government goes down, the markets collapse, government collapses, there's no police anymore. What do you have? You have these preppers sitting in their homes with a gun next to their chair, eating Cheetos, drinking bottled water, not tripping out about it.
Yeah.
Who's tripping out about it? It's all the unprepared people, and that's not anarchy.
It's everyone that relied heavily on social welfare programs. It's everyone that relied very heavily on state provided security and services and things like that, where
right.
They don't know anything else. They've never been taught to think any other way because they were raised to believe that the state will always be there to protect you. It was that warm blanket that they wrap yourself up with at night.
And not to discount asking for aid when you need it. I mean, when you need aid, that's fine, but dependence can and does breed weakness when it becomes a dependence.
Exactly. It becomes a way of life for some people, and then when that way of life, I mean, there's examples all around the world. I'm not even just talking about the United States. I mean, you look at all sorts of different societies, whether they're capitalist or socialist or whatever. A lot of times, it really doesn't matter. Once the state collapses, it's bad news for everyone because everyone is so convinced that system will be there to protect them.
Right. The suburban soccer mom expects, there to be police there in case the neighbor's dog is yapping all night, which is really kind of sad. But that's the point, is that she depends so heavily on the system that a minor nuisance is something she's not going to know how to deal with outside of the confines of bringing in guys with guns from the state to deal with it.
Right. And it's just, it becomes to the point where it's debilitating is really the best word I can think of for it. Basically people are left ill-prepared, ill-equipped, and again at that automatic disadvantage. So when people try and use that as an argument against the social philosophy of anarchism, I don't think that's a valid argument to begin with.
No, I mean, even if, let's say for a minute that the state didn't collapse, but the market did collapse, you're still going to have rioting, you're still going to have looting, you're still going to have insanity going on, you're going to have people losing their minds because they were ill-prepared for a market collapse. The state's still there, so obviously the state being there is not going to stop that from happening. It happened here in St. Louis, Ferguson. We had QTs, we had gas stations and stores burnt down over a teenager getting shot by a cop. All right? The government was there. It didn't stop the rioting and looting. If anything, I feel like it exacerbated it because people wanted justice for this kid and they wanted to, sit there and just not tell them anything, and they didn't want to discuss it, and people weren't happy with the result. And I mean, I can't blame them.
The whole situation was facilitated by government in the first place.
Right. If that cop, I'm not going to say whether or not Mike Brown was some, punk thug that deserved to get his ass kicked or not. But did he deserve 6 rounds thrown through his body? I don't think so. Not for stealing a couple of cigarillos and roughing up a store owner. Maybe a ass beating, but he got 6 bullets for being a punk kid. That's not a matter of anarchy. That's a matter of police responding with extreme violence over nothing. Or not being able to keep their heads in a stressful situation.
It's one of those situations where none of it was was good. None of it was justified. None of it was, was he right or wrong in the first place? Whatever. I'm not even going to open that discussion.
Right.
I
think both sides were wrong, but whatever.
But in any event, it didn't require killing someone over, and then it was exacerbated even more through the media and all that. And then as soon as it's one of those situations where as soon as chaos is induced by the state, they go, "Oh, it's anarchy."
Right.
No, it's not. No, that's not.
Right. I mean,
is at all.
And there's tons of examples of that. People say anarchy would be riots in the streets and roving bands of thugs and all this. And it's like you can have that right here, right now, all day. They had it in UK back in 2011. Some kid named Mark Duggan or Dugan, or however you say that, he got killed by a cop in London. All right. And there was this huge issue over it. I don't know it all because I'm not from Britain and I'm not going to research the living crap out of this instance. But the point is, something bad happened to this kid. It pissed off the whole country. There were riots across the board. Government was there the whole time. So you have that. You have that risk there one way or the other. The question, I think, is, does the media and does government make it worse? And I believe it does. I absolutely believe it does. Because it gets involved, and then it takes control of the situation and starts pissing off everyone, as opposed to just the players involved. This kid's parents versus the guy that killed him and his family. It would have been contained to that had it not been for government and media jumping in there and making it into this whole big thing. And I mean, you see, I'm going to go ahead and go to screen share real quick because I'm queued these up for a reason. So yeah, there's the death of Mark Duggan here, Dugan, in North London. This is just a bit of backstory about him. He was killed by a cop for whatever reason. I don't know what he did. Supposedly I think it had something to do with either weapons. Yeah, it had to do with weapons. He had a handgun. Anyway, regardless of that, he got killed by a cop and it started these riots. And then you have CNN here. This is a great example of how we get this cultural conditioning. UK riots, staring into the abyss of anarchy. Sounds scary as shit, right? The abyss of anarchy. It wasn't anarchy, though. It was riots and looters, taking opportunity of public distress to go around and do a bunch of vandalism and shit because they know the chances are they're not going to get killed for breaking into businesses. They're not going to get shot at for, vandalizing buildings and shit like that. They're going to get arrested. They're going to go to court. They might have to spend a little time in jail. Then they'll get right back out on the street and they'll have had their fun.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a time when they know they're opportunists because they know the police already have their hands tied with people who are already protesting and things like that. And so once you start breaking into store windows, it's just it's the broken window theory. There's a reason why it's called that.
Right.
So it's
but even more than that, you look at it, let's ask the question of if there was no state, what would have happened? Well, what would have happened was there wouldn't have been any police to deal with this, and that means people would have been prepared for what if someone breaks into my shit. Exactly. These guys are opportunists not only because they took advantage of the police being distracted, but they're opportunists because they take advantage of knowing that the law is going to protect them from vigilantism.
That, and also that basically the general population has already been hamstringed in the matter of self-defense.
Right.
Because they're supposed to rely on government to save their ass. And so when government can't save their ass, well, now what do? Well, now you get your shit taken.
Right. And then they say, oh, well, that's anarchy. That's not anarchy. The state was right. Anarchy. The state was right there. The state was fundamental in the situation to begin with. And the state was there as a safety net for these opportunists, knowing that thanks to the state, I'm safe if I go and do this. I might get beat up a little bit, but I'm going to have my fun. I'm not going to get killed. I might get arrested, but I'm not going to get killed over doing this. There's no threat to me.
People tend to get arrested during a riot and things like that. They don't tend to stay in jail for very long.
Right, and they get slapped to the charge, released back out, and they go through court dates for the next year.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything but enable people who want to act like that to act like that.
Right. Ask any criminal. Ask any real criminal. I mean, like a real criminal. They'll tell you laws don't scare them. Jail doesn't scare them. Courts don't scare them. Yeah, they want to avoid it, but if they want to do what they want to do, they're going to do it, and they're going to do it knowing that if anything, those laws are going to keep their asses alive. Because people are going to say, well, I don't know if I should kill this guy for this because maybe then I'll get hit with involuntary manslaughter charges.
I think we covered that a bit too on the last episode, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also we have, I was just about to bring this up, things like movies like The Purge, Anarchy.
Right.
Which was something I posted something in the Black Flag Coalition group a while back, and we had a pretty good time discussing all the ways that The Purge, Anarchy isn't anarchy by any means.
Right. It's the dissolution of all in The Purge. It's the dissolution of all laws for a 12-hour period or something like that. You can do whatever you want.
Or something like that.
Yeah, and basically the idea behind it is that people have so much pent-up aggression that one night a year we let them get that aggression out by being complete fucking animals, because that's what people do, right? They go out and be complete fucking animals because they're just so naturally fucking aggressive. That's why we have this civilized, society that we say we have. But here's the thing. This isn't anarchy for one reason and one reason alone. It's an unwritten purge rule that we don't save lives. Tonight we take lives. The government is encouraging violence, encouraging
by law,
murder, by law, and saying, don't be a fucking hero. Don't help anyone tonight. Instead, be as violent and horrible as you fucking can. In what way is that anarchy? That's the government saying, that's not anarchy. It's the government saying, go out and be a horrible human being. As opposed to anarchy, which is no government there to tell you that, or no government there to stop you from defending yourself, no government to dissuade you from being a hero. You hear that even today, honestly. You'll hear police say things like, don't be a hero.
If you see something, say something.
Right. Don't be a hero. Don't put yourself at risk. Well, that's a shitty way to be a human being. Human beings, a good human being puts themselves at risk for other human beings. The end. For police to say, don't be a hero, they're basically saying be a selfish asshole. That's government saying that kind of stuff.
Run and hide and, call a grown up is basically what I'm getting out of all that. But yeah, back to things like this movie though. It's actually the complete opposite of what anarchy actually is. Yet it's popularized through pop culture. So that people start thinking, this is, what anarchy is. And so every time that person sees an anarchist, that person who ignorantly assumes that anarchism is synonymous with chaos and violence and murder and disorder, they're going to dismiss that person at face value. And it's
cultural conditioning.
Yeah,
it's all cultural conditioning. We can even get out of media, and we can just look at the cultural conditioning from the people that we trust to tell us what things mean. Like Google. If you Google the word anarchy, a state of disorder due to absence or non-recognition of authority, they say that it's disorderly. Well, really? I mean, I don't know. Anarchy is a garage sale disorderly, I guess, in a sense. It doesn't have fancy racks and signs everywhere, but...
You might buy something with holes in it.
Right. Absolute freedom of the individual. Now, granted, they get that right. All right. Anarchy is the absolute freedom of the individual. But think about that. All right. You have stuff like The Purge saying this is anarchy, and it's so scary and horrible. But
here's the synonyms on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nihilism, macabrecy, or
which that is, this is a non-word. It's democracy made to sound scary, is what it is. Which, I mean, come on.
Mobocracy.
Yeah.
Is that what they're getting at?
Yeah.
That insurrection, disorder, chaos, mayhem, tumult, turmoil. Right. No, it's
right. But right here, all right, this horrible, scary, scary, scary word of anarchy is the absolute freedom of the individual. How scary that you might be free to live your life. It's horrible. It's horrifying. Here at the Free Dictionary, we've got absence of any form of political authority. I can agree with that. Political disorder and confusion. Political disorder and confusion. I can agree with that.
It depends on how you define what is the political, I
Or
suppose.
I consider it to be political disorder and confusion in terms of no established and absolute state.
It's political itself is kind of it's an ambiguous term.
It
It's
is. And I think we kind of discussed that. At least the word government is a very ambiguous term. And then here's their last one: absence of any cohesive principle, such as a common standard purpose, which is crap. You don't need government to have a common standard or purpose. If that were the case, you wouldn't have clubs, you wouldn't have organizations, you wouldn't have any of this. You would just have a bunch of random people walking around waiting for government to tell them what their common standard or purpose is.
right. I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, it's fine. I'm just kind of befuddled by that whole. It's just,
Let's see. State of society without government law. The government part, sure. Formal law, sure. Political and social disorder. See, now they're trying political and social disorder. Without government, we can't have social order. We can't interact with one another in an orderly manner without government there. You know, lack of obedience to an authority and subordination. I wouldn't say that's entirely untrue, but the way they try to extrapolate on to anarchy of his rebellious teenage years.
right.
Whatever. You know, they're trying to put a spin on
Well,
it.
it's negative connotation.
Right, it's a spin. It's true, but it's a negative spin specifically to make it seem like that's all it is. It's a rebellious. You're just being rebellious.
Yeah.
Confusion and disorder. Intellectual and moral anarchy, which I've never heard of anarchy used this way. I've studied psychology and sociology. Never have I heard the word used
Moral anarchy.
mean intellectual confusion or moral confusion. Never. Because it's not what it fucking means at all. Merriam-Webster was the worst. A situation of confusion and wild behavior in which the people in a country, group, organization are not controlled by rules or laws. Thanks, Webster. Good job.
Yeah, which is probably the one that if people are going to cite the dictionary definition of
It's going to be
something,
Webster.
what's one of the more probable ones that they're gonna use as a sound source?
Right.
Merriam-Webster.
Right.
Like, that's kind of the
So don't tell me there's not a cultural conditioning here. All right. This is the cultural authority on English saying that it's confusion and wild behavior. You know, but then they get into the full definition down here. Let us just go ahead and extrapolate on what confusion and wild behavior is. Absence of government. Oh, okay. A state of lawlessness. I can't talk, apparently. A utopian society of individuals who enjoy complete freedom without government. It's utopian for you to want complete freedom. You know, absence or denial of authority or established order. Now they're right back to it, but it's always the tertiary definitions that are right, in case you haven't noticed. Absence of order. Any science book I've ever read doesn't say that a system that is not ordered is an anarchist system. I've never heard that scientifically, so I disagree wholeheartedly.
yeah. That completely disregards natural order and spontaneous order,
Right.
and just the general rules of life that are unavoidable.
And for those that may not listen to the previous videos, just Google spontaneous order. We're not going to keep repeating ourselves any more than I just did. And just for fun, let's bring up the buddy word to anarchy according to media, which is chaos. Complete disorder and confusion. Behavior so unpredictable as to appear random owing to great sensitivity to small changes in conditions. The formless matter supposed to have existed before the creation of the universe. Chaos is not anarchy, all right? Do you, in your home where there are no police and there is no government making sure that holding your hand and telling you how to interact with your brother, sister, mother, father, do you have behavior so unpredictable as to appear? Well, maybe if you have a 5-year-old. Okay, if you have a bunch of teenagers, but owing to great sensitivity to small changes in conditions. I mean, I'm sorry, I've never seen a home without government there that is so crazy as to be considered truly chaotic. meaning complete disorder and confusion. Most homes run pretty smoothly. Yeah, they might do it in a haphazard way, but there's a reason we have the word haphazard. It's not quite chaos. So that's my 2 cents or 20 cents or $5 on that. We'll get to that tab later. Let me get out of sharing. So yeah, that's what I got.
All right. Well, the next topic we wanted to get into was basically practical anarchism. What is agorism? Basically, it's just the idea of, how do I apply these, these philosophies, these principles, these ideas in a state of society, and it can be complex in certain areas. And I understand that. The state being what it is, it's worked its way into.
It's a difficult factor to accommodate.
Right. So, basically the idea of agorism is participating in things like gray and black markets, which I know can be, it sounds bad.
It's scary.
At face value. Yeah. Black market's bad thing. But it's not. It's the idea of I'm going to purchase and sell or provide goods and services in a manner that subvert the state both fiscally and ideologically. And that's really the gist of it. It's doing things like going to the farmer's market and buying local foods, or, having a yard sale without a license. It's
the scariest of all, bartering with your neighbors.
Right. Or even using things like cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, Litecoin, there's several others. But things like cryptocurrency, because it is an untaxed, unregulated currency that isn't created by the state. It's not controlled by the state. In a lot of ways, it's not even influenced that heavily by the state. So, basically it's using the actual insight, and putting in the thought to what can I do with the lifestyle that to try and subvert the state in some manner. Now, I understand, certain people have certain careers where there's no way that you can feasibly operate in that career without a license or whatever, I get that. But there are still other things that you can do. You can take your money, and instead of saving it as USD, you can save it as a cryptocurrency, or you can buy precious metals. You can stock up gold and silver. Things like that, where you're actively trying to pull out of the state in whatever manner you possibly can. Jesse, I'm sure you probably have several other things that go into that.
Yeah, I've got quite a few. I should have said this earlier. I think we should take a quick small break just to give ourselves time to compose. So yeah, practicing agorism, anarchy today. There's some difficulties because you have laws and things like that say if you don't do things a certain way, you can get fined, go to jail, get kidnapped, get insulted, get accosted, get killed.
Get your shit stolen, get your money stolen.
But all that aside, there are a lot of things you can do, and it just depends on how much risk. It's a risk benefit thing, and how much you want to stand on principle versus how much you really want to risk. I think there's going to come a point where we're all gonna have to say, fuck the risks. We need to stand on principle, even if it means risking it all. But I think for a lot of people, that's a huge step because a lot of people are very tied in. I'm not, so I
also have things like families and careers and stuff like that.
And that's kind of what I mean by tied in, is you have not just you to worry about.
Right.
And I mean, I'm in a kind of a position, I've always have been in a position where I can more or less at any time go do whatever the hell I want. And shockingly, I don't go around killing people, so I'm proof that anarchists don't just go around rioting and looting and killing, because I could. I don't have anything to lose but myself, and I'm kind of okay with that. I joined the service and wasn't worried about getting hurt then. Why would I be worried about it now? But some of the ways that I do it is I get into quote unquote unlicensed businesses, which is gray market. They're not illicit businesses. They're not illegal. They're not doing anything that is otherwise illegal other than I'm not licensed to be making money doing it. And things of that nature are things like working on people's computers. If you have a skill set there, get on Craigslist, put up an ad, put up a sign on your driveway, something saying you'll do PC work, undercut your neighborhood PC store, whatever. Same goes for automotive work. And that's a huge niche. I mean, that is a huge niche. Everyone needs their cars worked on. No one wants to pay shop prices because they're all outrageous. And so if you're only charging $20-$30 an hour compared to 70 to 100 that shops charge, if you get enough customers, you can make a decent living just working on cars out of your backyard.
Or even more so, if you're just an independent contractor, it could be as simple as not filing taxes.
Right. If you're 1099, I mean, it's hard for them to come down on 1099s. Yeah. They can if they get into you, but usually the only time they ever really find out about that is if you file taxes and you haven't paid your taxes in previous years. If you choose to stop filing taxes today, chances of them ever finding out is next to nothing. And the amount of money you're making, they can't really ever prove it unless you're buying Ferraris and shit. So, I mean, that's just a matter of being smart, with how you spend your money. But there's things like that, doing basic contractors work, like doing landscaping. Most of those guys are unlicensed. They are. And they know it. And they might claim half their earnings just to make sure they keep the man off their ass. But, right. For the most part, it's untaxed work.
Which a ton of people do anyway.
Right.
I mean, people who condone the use of the state and all that still avoid paying taxes and things of that nature. People do it all the time.
Right.
It's honestly a matter of doing it intentionally for those purposes, though. It's a matter of, why are you doing? Okay, is it simply because you don't want to give government money, which I don't blame you. I don't want to give them money either. But right. Is there something more? Is there a larger driving force behind that, which is the difference between just simply not paying your taxes and consciously practicing voyeurism.
Right.
That's basically what I'm getting at.
Right. I don't want to say that that to be an anarchist, you have to consciously be doing things for anarchy's sake, but there are people that aren't necessarily opposed to government that do things that are subversive. People speed, people don't pay their fines, that people don't pay their taxes, people have garage sales. I mean, name someone that you don't know that's never had a yard sale or a garage sale. Guess what? That was untaxed, unlicensed, unapproved.
Right. If they went about it in that manner, I've had a ton of garage sales where we can get a damn license to have a yard sale. Like what?
Yeah. And then there's even the other side of it. There's someone I just talked to him. There's this thing called Arcade City that's popped up down in Austin in response to Uber and Lyft getting kicked out. And it is essentially free market cabbing. Instead of it's a networking platform for drivers and clients to allow them to get to know each other, like on a personal level, so that then they are not actually acting as a business, but instead it's like doing a friend a favor and your friend's giving you $20 for gas. And I've actually got that here. I just want to, for a quick second, show you what I'm talking about.
That example just goes to show that prohibition and regulation will always lead to black and gray markets, to people finding loopholes. It happens right. Every fucking time.
Right. There's always going to be a loophole, and it's always going to be exploited. And the question is that bad or good? Well, I don't know. You tell me. Would you rather, pay a set rate that is obviously expensive, like a cab, or would you rather give a guy, get to know a guy and be like, hey, I need to ride such and such, and he's like, all right, man, well, $20, here you go, whatever, take you there. But yeah, I mean, the whole idea is that you connect, the riders and drivers connect directly.
It's a social media platform.
Yeah, it's a social media platform for people that want to have other people that will give them rides. Um, and I mean, it sounds pretty cool. They're definitely not about getting licensing. They're not a business. They explicitly say they're not a business. They explicitly say they don't employ anyone. You
Right.
know, they're not contracting anyone.
Yeah, it's nothing but a social media platform with a distinct purpose.
With an agenda, with a very specific agenda. There's things like that. There's just simply buying and trading with people.
Right. And you have the same principle applied to things like security, where you have, community-based apps that are simply, it's a community. It's almost like the neighborhood watch programs, where you used to always see someone with the neighborhood watch sign in their front window or on the front yard. It's the same general idea. It's just an app that allows you to, instantly contact other people on the list should something happen in the neighborhood.
Right.
And it alerts everybody surrounding you.
Right.
I think it's a fantastic idea, and it's a great alternative to state-run security like the police. And it works on, it works for like paramedic and fire, all sorts of stuff like that. Like it's got different options and stuff like that, and it's just a quick push of the button, and it lets everybody in your community know, hey, something's going on.
Right. So I mean, there's anything the government does, people can do, and people can typically do better. The only thing that government has going for it is that it has what seems to be unlimited revenue, and so it can afford to do things. Yeah, it's easy to have unlimited revenue when everyone's paying their protection money,
and they print their own money.
Right.
That helps too.
It probably helps a lot, actually. Other things is just it's as simple as being as self-sustainable as possible. Do you buy your food at a grocery store? What can you grow at home? Can you have chickens?
What can you get at the farmer's market? What can you trade with your neighbor? It's
solar panels, solar energy is getting much cheaper for residential, and it's pretty easy to put together. It used to be tens of thousands of dollars to do it. Granted, most of that was tax deductible, but if you're not doing your taxes, well, that doesn't really help you too much. But now you're talking about a few $1,000s, which is still expensive. But in the long run, it's cheaper than dirt, and you don't have no taxes are going to the government through paying your utility bill there. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways, and honestly, I would say if you have a question about how something can be done, post it in this video. If you have ideas of things that you can do, post them down there too, because at the end of the day, being an anarchist today is coming up with solutions for yourself as well as sharing those solutions for others to decide whether or not to adopt them. That's how you can get anarchy to work, is come up with your own solutions and look for what other people have come up with.
Another good example was Detroit with the threat management companies, when the government infrastructure just completely bottomed out. And again, it was kind of a chaotic situation. There was a lot of people without, basic services and utilities and things like that.
Now, who saved them?
Themselves. They figured out a different way. And then, the market itself adapted to the needs of what was going on in that area. All of a sudden there's a private security company that doesn't have, a kill count like state-run policing. They're there for the specific purpose of defusing situations. That's what they do.
And even better than that, you can see Detroit is actually, or at least areas of Detroit, have actually gotten better since the collapse. They now are very much pushing for community gardening in Detroit. The communities are saying we're just going to garden and grow our own food, and we're going to share it with everyone. And that's great, and that's cool, and it works because the community is deciding to do this. It's not a group of people in some other part of town or some other part of the state or the country deciding this. It's people getting together and sharing amongst themselves, and even sharing with those that aren't a part of it if they wish.
Spontaneous order and self-reliance.
Big shock, Science might actually have it more right than politics. Who would have thought?
Another good topic to bring up as well is education. You know, if you do have kids, it's like, okay, I get it. There are certain things that you have to abide by, otherwise you're going to risk the state coming in and taking your child away. I get that. I totally understand that, you know, there are going to be limitations on what you can and cannot do in today's society with your child and all that. All right. So another big topic to bring up is education. Now, I understand in modern society there's going to be limitations on, you know, what you can and cannot do in regards to your children and things like that. You know, their education, their welfare, and all that. And so I totally understand that there's certain rules and regulations that you're going to have to abide by as a result of living in a state of society. But one of the things that you can do is homeschooling. You know, with the willful intention of pulling your child out of public schooling, and taking that duty upon yourself, or you know, at least finding alternative avenues of giving your child an education that isn't indoctrinating them from the first days of when they're trying to figure out logic and reason and all those sorts of things. You know, when they're very impressionable and blank slates and all that.
Right.
So, you know, and it's, you know, a little surprise that in today's society, when you start bringing up things that are quote unquote anti-American, in the sense that you're arguing against the use of government, that people automatically take offense to it. It's like, yeah, I understand it, you know, and at one point it probably offended me a little bit at face value, but you know, through you know, my basically my interest in anarchism and all that, and the things that led to that, I realized exactly how the whole system was set up. You know, with you know, being raised to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school.
Right.
It's a pretty. I mean, if you actually read the Pledge of Allegiance and define all the key terms in it, it's some pretty culty shit.
Yeah. Well, think about when you go to church. Right. You go to church in the morning. It hasn't. The sermon hasn't started yet. Everyone's milling about. Right. You know. Then you sit down, and then you do your prayers, and you do your, you know, you're singing the hymns. If you're Catholic, you do this or that or whatever Catholics do. I don't know.
Prayer or whatever.
Right. You go through this ritual motion of giving ode and honor and worshiping and respect to God and all of that, which I'm not going to debase, you know, religion here, but I'm using to show how similar that is to school. You know, you get to school, you mill about, you go to your class, you say your Pledge of Allegiance, you do what you're told. You know, you go from one room to the next and have these people tell you how the world is. And it's all based on a curriculum that has to be approved by government.
Right.
You know, government may not get in there and say exactly what and tell them exactly what words to use, but they tell them what topics and how it should be, what perspective to.
Right. And anyone that's researched modern Common Core education knows how distorted history books are, and you know, just how bad the whole system is in general. But also keeping in mind that you're sending your child to a place where you are having someone who, again, is very impressionable, pledge their undying fidelity to a piece of fabric and to the government that it represents. Now, when we're talking about anarchism, we're talking about, you know, things, and people make the argument that it's un-American. It's like, okay, well, what constitutes un-American? You know, what are the things that you supposedly like about America, which is, you know, usually going to be, you know, freedom and whatnot. It's like, okay, well, that's what I'm arguing.
Right.
Why I'm not arguing against the American.
It's amazing how quickly people say you're not patriotic because you're preaching anarchy. I'm preaching individual freedom The last I checked, that's what the Constitution kind of was supposed to be preaching. The Declaration of Independence was supposed to be preaching.
Right. And so it's this flaw in logic that's due to this. It's indoctrination. It's brainwashing. It is what it
Right.
is.
Absolutely. Well, here, and it seems this one seems very. I think the word is innocuous. I'm going to use innocuous, and grammar Nazis can rip on me if they want. It seems innocuous, but even something as simple as Christopher Columbus discovering America—that's what we all learned. We all learned that in school. You learned that in private school too.
Yeah. And then you get to college, and they're like, "No,
No, actually, the Vikings were here first, and this guy and that guy, and so you realize the shit you learned in your mandatory education isn't quite right. It was wrong. There's a reason that you have so many college dropouts because high school did not prepare them at all. But speaking on homeschooling, just for those of you that maybe are like, well, I don't know if I have the time, I don't know if I have the knowledge, I don't know if I have, the resources to do that. First of all, as far as knowledge goes, my aunt is a teacher. My mom was a teacher. They're both very good teachers. They didn't work for me, but that's because I was a complete asshole as a child. But teachers, generally speaking, aren't really that knowledgeable. Most teachers go to school specifically for education. It's their entire training is just how to educate. The knowledge that they're teaching is given to them when they get hired, and it's given to them in a book that they then regurgitate.
Right, that's the profession. It's you learn to regurgitate.
Right.
And now whether or not the teacher is a good teacher is a completely different.
Exactly.
But as far as just the curriculum of being a teacher itself, just for the profession at face value alone.
All you have to be able to do is take a curriculum and give it to kids and have them spit it back at you. Exactly. But if you're worried about that, well, maybe I don't have the resources or the education. First of all, if you don't have the education, you're living your life wrong. You should be educating yourself as much as you can anyway. So let me just tell you now, you're living life wrong if you feel like you're not educated enough to talk about history or basic math. But I'm going to go over to what I have up here. There's this thing called the Trivium Education, and there's tons of sources online for homeschooling, just FYI. But the Trivium method is something that they really don't teach in school at all. And the whole idea behind it is to teach you how to communicate, how to use logic, and things, and how to take these three parts, general grammar, formal logic, and classical rhetoric. To take these three things and teach a child how to use these three things to learn anything they want to learn, and they practically teach themselves from there, depending upon whether or not they want to learn something.
So basically, the guiding principle is teaching a child how to think, and then letting them think for themselves.
Right.
We're going to start you off with the fundamentals of how to make up your own damn mind on things.
Right, using logic and critical thinking to come to conclusions. That's what the Trivium method essentially is. It's using logic and critical thinking skills to then be able to infer and extrapolate information, and to be able to take in new information, compare it to old information and other information to come up with how accurate that is. If you know how to do this, if you know how to use critical thinking and logic, there's nothing you can't learn. It's just a matter of, do you want to take the time to learn it? But there are all kinds of resources on the internet and everywhere. There are schools that teachers go to get aids for teaching. You can go there too. It's not limited just to teachers.
I mean, you don't even when it comes to homeschooling, you don't even have to teach your child yourself. There's also a homeschool that's facilitated as well through the free market, where basically all you end up doing is going in once or twice a week. You pick up your packets, you do some work there, you take some tests there, whatever. You spend a few hours in, you turn in your work, you get your new stuff, and you go home. And you're given everything that you need to learn. I was one of those kids where I was terrible in public school. And my grades shot way up once I actually went to homeschool, because I was actually able to concentrate on things. I was able to learn things at my own pace. I wasn't being distracted. I enjoyed doing it. It wasn't that I ever had a problem with school because I didn't like learning. I didn't like school because I didn't like the way it was run. I didn't like the people there. I didn't like the teachers. It was ineffective. It was
not engaging.
It was not conducive to the way I wanted to learn. And it wasn't until I had the freedom to learn at my own pace in a manner that worked for me that my grades really improved.
Right. And then there's the argument for time. I don't have time to do it. Well, here's the thing. People think that to educate a child, they need to spend 6 to 8 hours a day doing schoolwork. And you got to understand that this education system is based around having hundreds of students and 30 or 40 students a class, or even, let's say even 10 or 20, and the teacher has to divide their time among them, and they have to get so many subjects in. And all. I was homeschooled for 1 year. My mom couldn't handle me. Like I said, I was an asshole when I was a kid, so it didn't work for me. It wasn't because they were bad because I was bad at being a student. But now I actually help tutor my friends' kids, because they're busy a lot of the time. So I only spend a couple hours a day. I get up in the morning, I go through and figure out what they're going to read, what problems I want them to do, what subjects I want them to do that day, and I write it down, and then I hand it to them and say, all right, go ahead and do this. When you're done with your work, bring it to me, and I'll check it over. We'll go over any problems you had with it. I'll help you understand things you don't understand. I spend maybe 2 or 3 hours a day on the days that I do this dealing with it. The rest of the time they're the ones dealing with it. I'm free to go about my business for the rest of the day. And if they don't get it done, then obviously I deal with that issue, which is usually, well, then that just means your weekend's shot. Good for you.
Yeah. And it's kind of a similar idea with the program that I went through, where it's not putting any pressure on the parents. The parents aren't doing anything different.
Right.
The responsibility falls on the individual at that
student.
point. Yeah, if they're not doing their work, it's because they're not doing their work.
Right.
If they don't understand something, it's because they're not asking questions. They're missing something, whatever. And you can go into the office, like the central office. You can go in there and get free tutoring on whatever subject you want at any time. So not understanding something isn't an excuse. Isn't an excuse for that.
Right.
Yeah, it's putting all that responsibility on the individual child, so their success and their failure is on them at that point.
Right.
And then also on top of, does the parent check to make sure that their packets are getting done at the end of the day, when you get home from work?
It's a matter of, the student has to do the work, but the parent also, you as a parent, you have to make sure they're doing the work, and you have to.
And that's the same with regular school anyway. You check to see if your kid did their homework. It's
the
same shit.
Well, they used to. I don't know if parents do that anymore.
Well, you know what I mean.
But yeah, it's called take some responsibility and have some consistency, and you can do it. It's not horribly difficult. And I think the reason we're kind of harping on this, amongst all the other things we could be talking about, education is the most fundamental way that we can improve society, is by raising a generation of decent and intelligent people.
More self-sufficient,
right,
and able to educate themselves through critical thinking and all that kind of stuff.
We are at an interesting point in history. I wouldn't say this is probably a point in history that the most people in the world have ever been formally educated, that are alive. Before the 50s, most people probably quit school before they hit high school, went on to apprentice at something and learn how to do stuff on their own and found jobs that way. We are a generation that almost all of us have gone to school. Almost all of us have gone through an education program, and look at how unprepared these generations really are. We're not prepared. Our grandparents, if the market collapsed tomorrow, they'd probably be fine because they would be prepared. They know how to deal with that stuff because they actually learned things, as opposed to just learning how to regurgitate information and how to take tests. They had practical skills and practical knowledge. You know, I'm not saying that a formal education is bad, but a formal education, mass producing formal education, just doesn't work.
It only goes so far.
Right. Do you want handcrafted, unique and highly durable and very sturdy and very high quality, or do you want mass produced IKEA? Because that's what you got. You've got IKEA students, which are your public education students, and then you have your handcrafted students. Those are your homeschooled and self-taught students. Which one would you rather have a society of? I personally don't want a bunch of fucking IKEA running around making decisions for the world. IKEA's crap. We all know it.
You look at the social conditions that we're in now, and it's no wonder. It's not surprising, at least.
Right. So
but we should probably move on to the next subject and wrap it up here with education. A big part of it that we were getting at was, just general open defiance of the state, and really getting into just, like we were saying earlier, figuring out what it is that you can do for yourself, what is it that you can provide for yourself, what is it that you can provide for yourself and your family through alternative means that aren't provided and funded by the state, and things that,
or rather, that fund the state,
or vice versa, that fund the state. Good point. And as well as taking direct action on things, and getting away from that mentality of, if you see something, say something. No, if you see something, do something. It's
right.
That's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, direct action is another really big one. A lot of people talk about, we could do this, we could do that. This is how people could deal with this without using government. But how many people do it? How many people go out and do it? How many people sit there and say, oh, well, we don't really need, government to clean up our streets. We could do it ourselves. How many people go out and clean up their street? I know I right now don't. I'll admit that. But I'm also in transition where I'll be moving here soon, and I'm kind of preparing for that. It's not the greatest excuse ever. Then again, I also live in a pretty clean neighborhood, so I guess I don't need to worry about it as much. But as an example, someone I know who is a very avid self-ownership advocate, i.e. an anarchist, he actually is taking direct action, and he's doing it. Well, that was a horrible lead up. He's doing it by just cleaning up his streets. This guy, down here in Missouri, central Missouri, his community has been having issues with trash and just their community not being taken care of in terms of litter and trash. And so he's organizing a cleanup, and he's not going to government and saying, you guys need to do something about it. He's not, legislating or, what are those guys called that go around getting signatures? Yeah, not but yeah, he's not going around trying to get some ballot or some measure. Yeah, petitioning. He's not petitioning for someone to do something. He's doing it himself. He's going door to door saying, "Hey, I'm gonna try to clean up the neighborhood on Sunday. Do you want to help me, or can you loan me a few bucks to get supplies, or do you have trash bags or any of that?" And he's doing this on his own. That's direct action. This is anarchy. This is, I don't need the government. I'll do it myself. I'll get who's willing to help me. Yeah. And that, when we talk about direct action, that's what we're talking. That's one of the things we're talking about. Take it upon yourself. Do it yourself. Don't wait for someone else to come up with the solution or to implement the solution. Be the fucking solution. If that means, if you can get away with it, patrolling your neighborhood in your pickup truck with your rifle rack and an AR there to deter would-be criminals, do it. Make a presence. I do it in my neighborhoods. Places that I've lived, I made sure that people knew this house is armed. And that meant the houses around it are protected most likely by this armed house. Even
direct action could be something as simple as, if there's a gnarly pothole or bump or something like that in the street outside your house, and you see people bottom out on it every single day.
Right.
You could spend 6 months to a year petitioning government, asking them to put in a sign, or you could grab some reflective tape and a chunk of sheet metal or plastic or whatever, and just make a sign. and put it in front of the bump.
Or you could even go buy some and go get some asphalt, dump it in there.
Or fix the pothole.
Be warned, some neighborhoods might fine you and tell you that you're a bad person for doing this, which just goes to show how ludicrous the system is, that fixing a pothole to be nice to other people is a bad thing.
Right.
But, if you see homeless people on the streets, you could petition for more social reform and this and that, or you could take $10 out of your pocket, take the guy to somewhere to get, some food, and take him to another place to buy him some clothes. You could do this stuff yourself. You could sit there and put together a drive, go to neighbors and go on forums on the internet asking for donations of clothes and money to then go around and help your local homeless. That's actually one of the projects I want to get into once I have the financial ability to do so, is to go around helping homeless, getting them off streets, building little miniature towns on a piece of property where they can stay to get their fucking lives together and have a secure place to stay for a period of time, and they help them get clothes and help them find jobs or find ways to make money or whatever. That's you can do that yourself, or you can spend the next 5 years lobbying and petitioning and voting and hoping that maybe at some point someone might do something.
Yeah.
After
most of the money that would get extorted to fund that project, it's wasted in the first place. Yeah, it's inefficient.
You can take $10, give it to government, and they'll give $1 to a homeless guy, or you can give it to a homeless guy $10.
Meanwhile, the homeless guy that you were worried about in the first place is going hungry and cold while you're petitioning.
Right.
It's just that difference of taking responsibility and taking action for yourself is really what we're driving, and that's every facet of your life that you can really think of. It's the same mentality at the very least can be applied to anything and everything.
Right.
And then it's just a matter of gauging the risk versus reward, and what it is that you're willing to commit to that idea and lead by example.
Right. What I do is I find if there's something, I sit down and I think about, all right, what do I want to accomplish? What are things in my life that I do that perpetuate the state, or that, whatever the case is, if I want to subvert the state, how can I do it? And I sit down and I say, well, all right, taxes are an obvious one. Find ways to avoid taxes. Fees, if you've got the balls, go for it. Don't get your car registered. Don't get your plates. Don't get your driver's license or let it lapse. Or
if you live in a state where you can get around it legally, whatever.
Right. If you know of ways of doing that, if you know the common law well enough that you feel like you could fight it, or if you know someone that knows common law well enough to help you fight it. I mean, it runs the gamut from big to small, and it's just a matter of what can you afford to risk and what carries the least risk versus what carries the most risk. Another big part of it is just talking about it, is not being afraid to talk about it with people that don't share that opinion. It's the anarchist echo chamber. I actually wrote an article about that. It's great and well to have all your friends on Facebook or in this one particular social group that don't tell you, yeah, man, the government's shit. Here's why. And you all are telling each other what you've been saying for the last 5 years, or the last year, or the last 6 months. But it's not doing any good. You guys are already on the same page. At that point, you're debating semantics at the most. Right. But talk about it with your statist friends. And if you're worried about them walking away, well, consider this. You haven't walked away from them, even though they're a statist, and thusly they perpetuate everything that you think is wrong with the world. If they're willing to walk away from you just because you disagree with them on that point, how good of friends are they anyway? Not even looking at the politics here. Just if your friends are willing to say fuck you over politics, is that really someone you want in your life to begin with? And at the very least you tried. Which is more than a lot of armchair anarchists do. People get caught in that echo chamber, and they get scared of going out and saying, hey, statist, you're a dumb fuck. This is wrong.
Another thing too is that the more this is the great thing about social media is that the more you network, um, the more you can create stable exchanges and long-term arrangements with people from all over the world that have different talents. They provide different products and services and things like that. So if there's something you can do where you can organize something locally, if there's enough people in a local area where you can organize something locally, awesome. If you can set up something online where you join a group where it's like a buy sell trade group
Right.
or whatever, there's all sorts of alternative solutions for stuff like that. And
Right.
so really it's just a matter of applying yourself in certain ways to I guess just practice what you preach.
Right. Right. Um, I think with that, there's not much else to get into this episode.
Yep, I think that about wraps us up for this week.
I would want to encourage people asking questions for our hopefully future segment. So if you want to explain what that is.
Yeah, just any questions, comments, concern, we'll get to them in future episodes. Leave them in the comment section below, and we'll get to them at the end of next episode. Until then, I guess we'll see you next time. Thanks.